I'm just experimenting here. This is a bit like having an out-of-body experience.
Well, sure. It's like when you're on a work Zoom or Teams call and somebody's sharing their screen of everybody's video camera on the Teams call.
All right. So,
Okay, we got the audio.
okay, good. So I think I had one of the remarks earlier, but Thomas is going to talk about grid case computers. Grid case, what's the number now?
1500 series.
1500, so inside and out.
Yep. So that's basically, yeah. And a little bit about what Grid was actually trying to accomplish here. Hey guys, for those of you who don't know, my name is Tom Cherry Holmes. I'm just a local DFW computing enthusiast here, and I've been spending a significant amount of time in the last year basically reconstructing a number of pieces of Grid's development environment for these particular machines. But before we even talk about that, we need to talk a little bit about what Grid was and a bit about what these machines were trying to accomplish. Grid was a company founded in 1979 by three individuals from Xerox PARC with the goal of creating what we would call cloud computing today. Very far-fetched, but the thing is that they managed to actually pull it off. And the centerpiece to that work was a computer that they called the Compass. It is very much the same form factor as this guy right here, with the main difference being that it had an electroluminescent display, had a 5 megahertz 8086, and had bubble memory as its primary mode of storage. Because the goal was to be able to take and utilize remote resources across the network and to temporarily copy them onto the machine to work on. So you fast forward a bit, Grid releases the Compass, and the world goes, well, okay, great, this is an 8086, right? So it can run MS-DOS? Okay, crap, we'll make it run MS-DOS. Okay. And then they show off their wonderful development environment, and they say, well, that environment is great, and it's multitasking, not like we need it or anything, but can it run 1, 2, 3? Okay, fine. Jesus Christ. So that brings us to the second generation of these machines, which was called the Grid case. And the Grid cases are IBM AT compatible machines. You can see right here that the machine itself is made from machined magnesium that has been painted black. It is very sturdy. You can see right here along this edge here, you have 2 drive bays which can either hold floppy drives or floppy plus hard drive, or just hard drive by itself, which is possible because there are external peripheral connections on the back. Really? Come on, quit that. We have right here along the back, we have a number of peripheral connections which include the internal modem. The internal modem is modular, so you could have a 300, a 1200, or a 2400 baud modem in here. Serial port, external floppy disk port, parallel port, and either CGA or VGA port depending on the video module that's actually inside of here. There is also what's called a pod port, and I wish I could actually take and get a bit more inside of here if I could.
Flashlight?
Let me see if I can.
Flashlight's coming.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah, a little bit. You can see those 2 connectors inside of here. These are actually ISO connectors so that you can have expansions. And one of these expansions, as an example, is this guy. It's a VGA cartridge, VGA and EGA cartridge, also does Hercules. All in one device. Just take and smack it in there, and there's your peripheral. You also have the ability to have batteries as well, and your power adapters, which could also take and slot in here as well. So you can have power in here. And the power is very flexible. You could either have the power inside the unit, providing power and battery connections, or you could connect it via the power connector out here, battery connector, which in this case, any 16-volt power supply will do. This is just a battery bank of 18650s. It powers it just fine for about 3.5 hours. On a plasma display, no less. So nothing really on the other side here, but you'll see that the laptop itself has an ergonomic case handle that you can use either as a carrying handle if you wish, or you can use it as a kickstand. Opening up the unit, we'll go ahead and reapply power connection here so I can get some power to this beauty thing. We have, on this particular model, a gas plasma display, which typically runs at 400 lines. So it's 400 line CGA using a video mode that is similar to the AT&T 6300 or Toshiba 3200 series devices. Oh, come on, you're gonna act like that to me? Focus! And this particular unit right here actually takes and boots up into Grid's environment. Now recall I said that Grid had built their own operating system. It started with the Compass, and when it was clear that the industry did not know or care about what Grid was actually trying to do, in a last-ditch effort, Grid actually took and ported the entire operating environment over to MS-DOS and called it Integrid. The whole thing. Multitasking and all. And the way Integrid works is actually kind of nice. They did a very simple 3-level file system for everything for everything in the system. So you started off with devices. Selecting, hitting return gets you into a list of subjects, which for Integrid map to MS-DOS directories. And then from that point you can take and select a particular title and a particular file, a particular type. Now, what's also kind of interesting, if I can take and push down here, you can see we have a number of special keys on the keyboard, and one of them here is the confirm key. And this is used all throughout the Grid operating system to confirm actions that you select. So with that, oh come on, I apologize, fellas. I really am just flying by the seat of my pants here. We can take and select the document to go into. Get the confirm key, come in, and since the last thing I did on this document was look at a chart of the data that was in the spreadsheet, it's showing me a graph here. I can of course hit escape, come back out to the spreadsheet here, do different operations, and get things done. The Grid operating system works on a very unified user interface set of principles, in that you have what are called code keys, which you would use by pressing the code key or the Alt key on this machine. If I take and hit Alt question mark, I get a list of possible operations that I can do that are available throughout the entire program. And the thing about this particular interface is that it is entirely modeless. These operations are available anywhere inside the program, and they went to great lengths to try and make as many of these operations common across all the applications that they wrote as humanly possible. So once you learned it in one program, it translated very quickly into others. It made it very easy to work with. You can of course take and select it here in the help menu to select either an operation, or you can use the code keys directly. For example, I'll hit command code G to graph, and then I'll take and graph a selection. Sure, no problem. Maybe I want to take and hit graph options here, confirm that. We'll change the type of graph that we're using here. And what you'll see here is essentially a properties form. If you're familiar with, if you are familiar example, say the Xerox Star or similar systems, they used a similar mode of selecting options for different things inside the program. They lifted this pretty much wholesale, because all this basically came from Park. I can take, for example, come back through here, select pie chart, confirm the operation, go ahead and graph the selection, confirm that, and say, yes, I want to use the existing selection. And now there it is, ready for me to use. Now, one thing you'll note here, the user interface is extremely minimal. Only what you need to get things done, and nothing else. No extra decorations, nothing extraneous. On top of this, there are other interesting little tricks that you can do. There are window keys. You can get an overview of how the windowing system works by going into the windowing view, which will show exactly what I'm about to show you now. We could, for example, begin a new application. Apologies. We're back here at the File menu. We'll come over here to DFW Retro, and I will pull up my grid systems database, or maybe my organizer. Oop, is it? I guess, okay. Try it again. Spreadsheet takes up a ton of memory, so I guess I may actually. Okay, grid systems database. Look at the help again. We have a series of operations that we can do, such as finding records, inserting new records, etc. Apologies. So, find a new record here, confirm. I will pull everything up. So here are all of the grids that I currently have in my possession with all their system characteristics, the type of display that they have, power supplies, and everything else. The interesting thing about all of these applications is that you can actually take and integrate them all together. You can move data between applications just fine, like you would expect to today, but you also have integration languages. If you've worked with languages like Rex, for example, those things are available in the form of what's called grid tasks. So you can have a grid task program come in, pull out records, and pull them into a chart, pull them into another program, get measurement data from a measuring device, whatever. So right now I actually have two windows open here, and if I take and actually let me take and kill the spreadsheet and open something else. Take and switch. Yeah, okay.
How much memory does this machine have?
This machine has 2 megabytes of memory in it. The thing is that this is a real node application, so not all of that's actually available. So let me kill this real quick. We'll take and open something else. Like say, for example, we'll open up the development environment here. Open up the development file, let's open up the source file, and this will use the grid word processor to take and look at a piece of C code right here. But now, I can use Command-Shift-W, those are the windows that are open, we have that one. But maybe I want to show something else. I'll take and split the window vertically. I get the ability to take and specify how I want the window split to occur. And I will run the application that's running over here in this system here. Here we go.
And what year was that?
Huh?
What year are we talking about?
Integrid 86.
86?
This particular version, but the environment actually goes back a few years prior to
Yeah,
that.
but 84, that's impressive.
So, I mean, the environment actually goes all the way back to 1983. So, when they did the first release of it, and they carried this environment forward quite a few years actually. So you'll notice I'm just splitting things up, adding applications, running things as I need them. And it just handles it just fine. And yes, all of these windows are preemptively multitasked. No memory protection, but they are preemptively multitasked. So the other aspect of this is you can kind of see with what I've been doing here. I'll put this window away. Put that window away. I've been working on essentially rebuilding the entire grid development environment, which is, if any of you are familiar with Intel's development tools, was built on top of UDI. So that means that the development tools that ran under ISIS-3, the development tools that run under IRMX, ran under Integrid with no changes. So what you got as part of that was a PLM environment, a Pascal environment, a Fortran environment, and you could get a C environment. The funny thing was, even though the C environment was not, even though you could buy the C environment, Grid never made bindings for it. But I have corrected that deficiency. So what I actually wound up doing was going through each of these individual bits of the binding here. We'll open one of them up.
How many of those were there? How many bindings did you have to?
Well, close to about 60. Yeah, 60 different functions in the library. So yeah, it didn't take too long, but once I knew what was going on, I'll just pull up one example of one. Let's see. W invert line, sure. I literally had to take, all I basically had to do was take the parameters as they were being passed through in C, move them around to the format that PLM was expecting, and just make little shims in between to take and be able to do that. But now, because of that, I can take and write applications for this environment in C. Because as much as I like PLM and Pascal, I like C more. So, I wish I could show you more of the environment, but I actually have to get moving along here. And I'll end here by basically showing a bit of the internals of the system. For me, here we go. Back to the plan. Holy cow. We have right here, oh, don't do that. That's what you get for improvising. What you have here is a very standard IBM AT machine. It just happens to be crammed into a laptop full. You can have up to 8 megabytes of memory in SIP form. Ironically, one of the few remaining adopters of SIP after everybody went to SIMS, for whatever reason. You have a fairly standard 386 socket here, and you have a series of Faraday chips, which take and provide all of the systems level integration. This is the FE3000 series chipset, which provide a full IBM AT machine. The BIOS on this guy, basically standard 128 kilobit BIOS and 2 chips. And otherwise, fairly standard logic, fairly off the shelf, extender floppy controller, and the like. You'll see over here the connections for the floppy and the hard drive, and they go to this backplane card right here. You have one of these backplanes in cards inside these machines, and each of these have a series of logic on them to tell the system what's actually installed. So you don't have to configure any of this inside the machine at all. You basically just have to plug it in to what you wish, and the system will automatically detect it. Connected for floppy, connected for hard drive, power connections, whatever. Conversely, here's the one for the for just floppies only. So you can have 2 floppy drives in the system. Very modular, very easy to work on. You saw kind of the backplane connectors before. Those are just a standard ISA backplane. So you could put a full-blown ISA card inside of here if you wish to. And in point of fact, that's exactly what the VGA expansion card is that I have over here. So all in all, a very extremely flexible machine, extremely well built. I think that's pretty much it from me. Does anybody have any questions?
Is that battery old or new?
That battery is actually new, so it's not too bad. Yeah, nothing too bad. Nothing too bad there.
Did you have to have cells put into an existing case, or how'd you solve the battery problem?
I solved the battery problem by using an off-the-shelf, by finding an off-the-shelf battery on Amazon that could output 16 volts. So
I was referencing the board killer there.
yes, I know.
Oh, okay.
I know what you
I
were.
realized-
I know what you were referencing, and I know what he was referencing. So that's 2 different things.
The TP slot next to the CPU, 387?
Yes, yes, you can put a standard 387 in there. There's also a slot here for an internal modem. I mean, all in all, it's for all of these different machines. This is one of the best machines I've ever had to work on in terms of services. Nothing like it.
If you were to run this for a while, how hot does it get?
That depends on whether or not you actually have something like, say, this power supply work inside the machine or not.
Uh-huh.
If you keep it outside the machine, it's actually very cool. One of the nice things about it, you'll notice that there is no fan here at all. That's because the entire case is thermally conductive. So any heat that shows up inside the case literally radiates out.
There's no approaching to fire, being magnesium.
Yeah. Well, you know how hard it is to take and set magnesium on fire?
That's right, not that hard.
It takes a little bit of effort.
Yeah.
But, I mean, yeah, so just overall, extremely flexible. I've never, in the development environment, I am angered to no end that the industry looked at what Grid was offering at the price that they were that I understood, given the price that they were offering leading edge stuff, that the industry just kind of went,
I only remember them from like, I would say probably mid-90s, when they became just normal plain
yes.
Windows type machine.
Tandy.
Still very
Yeah.
expensive.
That's the I know. That's the second part of the story. Tandy acquired Grid in 1989 and basically just turned them into their boutique arm for the last couple of years. And that it was a crying shame. The entire software wing basically rebelled and left when Tandy acquired them.
What did they do? Did they start something else up or spin it off? Or?
I don't know where they went. That's the thing. It's
It might be the last call.
maybe.
So what's the,
You might know
Paul claims to have engineered a couple of pieces of grid case hardware. Maybe.
I was gonna say this, Tandy, right?
Tandy at the end. Tandy acquired them in 88, 89. For reference, the grid cases first came out in '87, and the last grid case was the 1550, which they released in '91.
And what was that running? That was a 386?
That was a 386 SL20.
You mentioned that they were kind of trying to do cloud computing
Yes.
before. What specific things did they do in order to?
Well, the way they attacked that was through several different ways. One, they had a nationwide network of System 36 machines, which have distributed storage that you could take and store your files, run your programs, documents off of directly. That was called Grid Central. They even had it where you could purchase the applications directly from Grid Central and run them directly from Grid Central. So App Store functionality way before anybody else. And they also had the ability to have department grid servers. So you could have grid servers and have each grid machine either connected over the telephone or through GridLink, which was a version of SDLC. So
Pretty impressive.
they were working very much ahead of their time because they built everything on top of UDI. It was very easy for them to literally make a zero distinction between a local and a remote resource. And in point of fact, the grid compasses didn't have a floppy drive or any sort of removable storage. Everything was bubble memory. So the removable floppy drives, etc., only came with the grid cases and at the insistence of prospective buyers, because they were extremely confused by the grid compass. They were mystified by it and they were confused by it, which the only people that, it seems to be the only people in history that seem to be, oh my God, this is expensive, oh my God, this is beautiful, I don't understand it, but I'll buy it anyway, seems to be the US government. So, they were the biggest customers.
Probably, I'm guessing military then? Or
Yes, not just, virtually every branch of government, including the military, had buyers for grids. And in point of fact, Grid had their Department of Defense subsidiary spun off. They exist today as Grid Defense Systems. They make hardened laptops for the military. And the first thing, Grid was the first company to actually make a laptop that was completely Tempest certified. I have one. Not supposed to still exist, but I have one. They're ridiculously difficult to get into. I mean, 50, 60 screws just to get past the shielding. So,
Holy cow.
yeah. And no, you can literally, this thing emits no noise. None. So, yeah.
Oh, make it work, if you have, World War III,
Yeah.
you're set.
Yeah, pretty much. These are my machines when the apocalypse hits. So
I know this
The
is
thing-
what, like Army systems would use these in the battlefield. Like
Yes.
I used to work for an Army systems group, and that's what they would have running the electronics in the battlefield.
and yeah, you guys can come over and touch and feel these machines and use them. They're built extremely well. And look, my God, full travel keyboard for fuck's sake. Made by Honeywell Aerospace. So.
And it actually types.
It's nice. The big gripe that people had with that keyboard back in the day was it's like, oh my God, they used the PC Junior keyboard layout.
I guess what, three quarters?
Yes. Yeah, it's there are function keys and things that you have to overlay, but
Yeah, give it a week and I use it.
yeah,
That's the
dude,
problem.
whatever. I code on it all the time, so it works just fine. And one of the nice things that you can do, because these systems are so modular, you do have to patch the BIOS a bit, but I've taken and I've got a handful of Discon modules that I have in my bag right over there. I replaced the hard drive with DOMs. Done. and a BIOS overlay, and the machine just runs. One of the other nice things, I didn't go over. There is right here, if you guys want to take a look over here in the front, there's a compartment for application ROMs, and this was back when disk space was at a premium. You could take and put applications that an application that you always needed to be there at 250K right there, and really fast.
Do you have any?
I do, but I don't have any installed. So, and Grid has, Grid distributed the software to make the application ROM. So you treat them like a ROM disk.
But I'm thinking, show it to a kid nowadays. Hey, kid, this is your SD card now.
Yeah.
Be careful with plugging it in. Careful.
Yeah.
Special tool to remove.
Oh.
You know,
The
don't bend the
only,
legs.
the funny thing about all this, and Grid really, if you look at these sockets, Grid really liked these machine sockets like crazy. And they're great if your pins are perfectly straight. But God help you if one pin is ever so slightly off. Yeah.
You mentioned bubble memory. Is any of this using that?
The
or
grid
is that wrong?
cases, no. By the time the grid cases came out, they dispensed with the bubble memory. There was a whole bunch of factors basically involved in that, and one of them was that Intel basically ejected from the bubble memory business.
Didn't last very long.
And that brings me to another point, actually. The grid name is stylized with a lowercase I. There is actually a reason for that, and that's because it was a nod to Intel, because Intel provided so much DNA to this, to the Compass and to the early grid machines, the development environments, the compilers, all the system software came straight from Intel. That's the funny thing. If you really were to look at grid from a systems standpoint, it comes from an alternate dimension where Intel was the primary system vendor. And we have been, the IBM PC was so unbelievably successful in its system design that the alternate system designs that Intel was pushing with things like the Intel 8089 coprocessor and IRMX and ISIS 3, you don't see those things outside of the embedded world. But they were present here in all of this.
Oh, they had a code name for that one too, because that's the 8186.
Mhm.
It was also meant for embedded
Yes,
applications.
yeah, the 8186 actually has an 8089 in it. That's the I/O processor that's in it. And that's why it's not compatible with the
It's got
8286.
a lot of stuff built into it.
Yes, it was meant for embedded systems. It was never meant for desktop machines. So,
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. That was fantastic. Thank you. I guess I'm looking forward to seeing more of these students.
all right, I winged it too much, but you know.
No, that was really great. That was really great. Thank you very much. And of course, anyone who wants to continue discussing this is welcome to do so in just a little bit. In the meanwhile, Joel has a talk. It's TRS-80 Network 3, is that right?
Network 3, and you don't.
And it's a show and tell. We've got all this set up here. You want to sit back here and just kind of play conductor and.
I guess. I'm still trying to figure out. I meant to have my laptop with me when it ran either. He was having trouble getting the display set up, so I figured I would tell him.
Can you man the camera?
Yeah, I think I can.
I was gonna see if I could get my phone, because I have a couple of pics on the website that I could use, kind of, I guess, to show itself, but I could totally just go into it and we could just demo with the real stuff here in front of me. So where do I start? So
Let's see.
okay, so let's start with the Network 3. We'll come back to this fun stuff. So this is this is Radio Shack Tandy's CE implementation of their computers. Model 3, Model 4 non-gate array, then came the later gate array 4 and the later gate array 4P. So those are running the more modern chips. These are the earlier systems, obviously with the white monochrome or the white CRT displays. The network. So where do we start? It starts with this guy. Somebody, a lady that I've been buying Tandy stuff from about a year now on eBay. Popped up with this guy. She wanted a ridiculous amount of money for it. I keep saying she actually passed away. So bad.
That's bad.
She didn't have a very good, she wasn't living a very good lifestyle, and you can kind of read it from the stuff online, but she had started selling out her father's storage sheds. She told me he had 3. He owned 3 Radio Shacks in Florida. And so he had a whole mass of, she and her brother, apparently, these were siblings that had inherited his stuff when he passed away. And that was one of the things, and then I don't know if I have anything else that I bought from her sitting on this table, but there is a lot more at home. But I got cards for the 6000 and Model 2 systems and whatnot, but that's for another day. I'll have those exhibits as well. But yeah, so she listed the Network 3, it's in terrible shape. The discs were not readable. It required me to basically surgically remove them from their jackets, cleaning them extensively for about a day, and even then, and I'll have these out, you can still see it still could not get where mold had started really getting into the media there. But I was able to scrub it enough to where I could get a good read using image disc in mode 4 and 6. And that was where I rescued these images from using that. There were 2 software releases for the Network 3. There was the Network 3 floppy only, where you wouldn't have a hard drive. You would have, your network, you'd start your host, your Network 3 software, you'd start the host program, you'd take the disk out, and it would leave you with just these for storage mediums for the students to use. So the students could share your disk drives, but they'd all be writing to it, and it would all be done on one disk. They released the Model 3 hard disk operating system, and it's kind of like a hybrid mix based on LDOS, and but it's from the statement that I read in the manual, it's to emulate TRIS-DOS version 1.3 as if you're using a disk system. So it's kind of like a mix of the two. You basically boot into LDOS, and then you start the host program, which aligns more with TRIS-DOS, the original DOS released by TRS. But yeah, so pull all the data off these, got them imaged, started learning how to figure out how to get it installed and what all I needed. It requires that you obviously have the Network 3, that a hard drive, either 5 or 15 megabytes. It has a special setup for a 15 megabyte drive, which is what this one is, where if you had a 5, it would just say, use your documents for your 5 megabyte hard drive, have it set up, and then just come copy over host, and away you go. With the 15 megabyte drive, it has its own special JCL files and job controls that it calls, that does a special formatting, and basically turns this into 6 hard drives instead of 1. And it splits it into 6, 15, 2.5 megs each. And it divides it up among the cylinders and whatnot. So I have games loaded on one. Obviously it requires the student software, everything for the Network 3 to be on 0, and then the other drives are empty. I've yet to find any of the software to fill them up. So yeah, I got the software going, finally got it cleaned up, but it didn't have any hardware. It didn't have the Network 3. But I was on the Candy Discord with collectors, hanging out, and a guy, a lot of people don't know him, but Peter Stensky, he's a major collector of the Model 2. He actually runs the Model 2 archive that you find online with all of the software now. So it's unbelievable. Most software I've seen easily accessible for any of these computers ever. He actually had a couple of these, and he was willing to let it go. It was missing a power button, and it was untested. I have no idea if it worked, but bought it anyway. I have the software, might as well try to get it going. This guy is a compliment, and I'll cover him in just a second. It's a Network 2. It came before this, but it actually, instead of it replacing it, Radio Shack basically made it work together, and I'll go over that here in a second. But yeah, so the Network 3, it's RS-232 based, has 16 ports plus a host port. It connects to the host and works with the software. As you can see, it has a mode switch here. You can flip it into its own mode where it doesn't use the host. I've never tried it. I don't know why it doesn't say, there's no specific mode you would use that in the book, the software for, so I'm assuming that somebody could buy this and use this with another system as just like a basic RS-232 concentrator, or whatever you would call it back then. Sorry. It has a 555 internal timer, so if you flick this, if I can do it, I'm not really loading anything. So if you flick it into that mode, it's now not listening. This is not connected to it anymore. It's just basically polling. and it'll just constantly continue polling, and it'll just like, and as soon as something needs something, it'll stop, it'll handle it, and it'll continue moving on. When you flip it back into mode, it hands it back over to the host. The host then handles the requests asynchronously, so depending on whatever student, it doesn't have to, go in like a round robin fashion. It can just answer students as they need it and as they would request. So I don't have a whole bunch of the student software recovered. I've only been able to mainly find Radio Shack K-8 math. I also did find Pascal, but it didn't have any software with it. So
You know what, it says what, 16 ports?
mhm.
So I'm seeing here 2 kids to a computer. If you look at the old ads or old movies from that era, it's usually 2 kids to the station.
Huh. Okay.
So about 32 people class, I guess.
Yeah. No, I didn't know if they would sit them 2 in front of a station or not. I guess it may make sense because schools couldn't really afford a
Yeah,
whole bunch of
that's the way my school was with terminals. They only had 2 terminals, but we were supposed to pair up, and I think that would probably be pretty standard.
Okay.
But they can also, I think the intention was that kids could help each other
Yeah. I
when
could
they
see that.
get stuck.
That was kind of their whole advent of the Network 3 with Radio Shack is you had the 2. So this guy functions basically off of the cassette boards.
Yeah, it's a cassette sharing device.
Basically, yeah. It doesn't have any like special software. There is some special tech in here. I'm not fully aware of its capabilities. It may do some things that I'm not aware of, but as far as I understand it, you only have multiplex and cassette mode.
Yeah.
Cassette mode is single. I can dial in whoever I want.
Yes.
We can, as long as we're lined up, we can connect and talk and send files back and forth.
Cassette mode is literally network 1 mode.
And then multiplex is where this came in and they said, hey, don't throw this away. Even though you have a Network 3 now, this will help you because the majority of the student stations around here were still diskless. They didn't have any floppy built into them. You would only load them with software either via the cassette port or the kids could type it in via workbooks in front of them. When the Network 3 came along, you needed to be able to get the network software to it. Later systems, this one does not have it in ROM, so this one has it in ROM. So I can reset, I can go into Model 3 mode, Radio Shack Basic, and I'm going to load a system file. There is, later on, Radio Shack built a bootstrapper into ROM. It's not the actual system software, but it's just a bootstrapper that grabs it from a file on the hard drive. And so you basically, it's called hard swap memory, over, remember, I call that in TRS-80 terms.
Yep.
Actually, you should have seen it say, it'll say whichever student's talking at the same time, as per baud rate, and boom, I'm online. So I didn't need a disk. I didn't need any software. The same can be done with that one, but I have to have the disk, as I was explaining early. When they built the Model 4P, they didn't include the ROMs that are in this guy or this guy. It basically is just a really stripped down ROM or a loader, and it looks for the ROM on the, you would get this disk if you bought the Model 4P. And it would basically have the ROM and I think some other files that go and help you to support and run Model 3 programs. But yeah, other than that, once I load that, I can also do its network. It has the calls in it with a bootstrapper to pull it from the system. This one, however, I just upgraded with GoTech. It did have a floppy drive in it. Actually, did not have a floppy drive in it. This is technically a cassette model. I actually upgraded it with a controller and drives. But this drive's not aligned. A lot of the floppy drives I got from Computer Reset, and nobody else got to do those fun things, but there was a whole palette of these generic, unmarked, unnamed drives. Damn near every single one I pull out, unaligned. Can barely read a disk off of it. Clean, functional, you can lubricate and run them, but they just don't read the line. So, GoTech in place, and it's booting the student software, and then of course loading games from the hard drive. What else? What else did they cover? This was really cool. This, along with being software, or not having software with it actually, but this was a teacher's guide for teaching basic. I really wish the other ones would come up because they're really cool to find. If you want to carefully look at it, you can. It has over 160 something transparencies in it for basically teaching basic. And they're in amazing
fancy solution for teachers.
You're tasked to come in here next time with the overhead projector.
Right? I wish I can't really see the detail on these, but it's just amazing. Obviously, it's built for the Model 1. I learned, one of the other collectors pointed out to me, I was like, how do you tell which one of these is the older and which one of these is the newer? The newer style came in the dark black binder and they actually carried this logo across all of them. So like all the books look like this, they'll have this on the front cover, but they're different software titles. This was the earlier one, and you could tell because it only has the Model 1 and the Model 2, whereas the later one has the Model 3 and the Model 2. So I thought it was a neat way to tell.
Same style of art. I
Yep.
see.
Oh my gosh.
Drawn, you know.
Yeah, the Atari and Apple have that same watercolor sketch.
I love it. I don't know who up in Tanny Towers did the artwork. I asked on the Tanny Discord, find out who it was and if there's more or others we could find. I love finding these. Some of the binders I find are in great shape, but you can actually just use a small razor, come across the top here, and you can slide these inserts out. And I bet, like, even though this insert looks yellowed, it's just this like
just
binder.
plastic.
When I take them out, they look pretty clean. I started scanning them in. Anyone's that can find my scanner. As you can see, so let's go to the big 5 game here. I've got on a poster board and why I've got it this way. Although it looks cool and it's for fun, I wanted be able to show this. I wanted to show on my website because I have the damaged picture. I spent about 4 hours recovering this picture. This was a small insert. I mean, this is yay big, smaller than a standard piece of paper. And when I scanned it in, I was just blown away. My scanner brought it in at a super, super high resolution. So I spent the afternoon cleaning it up. There was damage where there was a direct fold across here. There was a direct fold across here. It actually went through the A. There was damage to this picture here where something heavy, corner-wise, had been jammed down onto it. There was damage to the button cells here. And then the Big 5 logo had some damage, I believe, to the V and the I. Some of it you can kind of still see. I left some of it just for old, to give it that look and feel. But yeah, I cleaned this up, and I like to be able to show this. This was two guys wrote these games. Big 5 is a name you'll recognize if you don't. If you start getting into TRCs, you'll come to learn Big 5 was a pretty big name. There was 2 kids. One of them worked at Radio Shack. He was 18, and his friend was 14. And his friend would come along after school every day, and they started, developing a friendship and writing games. And they wrote that one, obviously Robot Attack. There are, I haven't under the table, I haven't brought them out yet. They wrote about 6 to 10 games under the Big 5 title names, and I think eventually sold them to Radio Shack, who started putting them under a different company name. But you can always tell their style is very recognizable on their covers.
The name you're grabbing for is Bill Hope.
Thank you. Yes, Bill Hope. He said this was his favorite cover, so I was like, you know what? Let's get it on a poster. It actually was a poster, and I took it to. I was worried about it getting damaged, so I took it to Hobby Lobby and had them foam press it so that it would. And I was like, no, don't cut the borders off because they're going to get messed up as I move it around. Eventually, I'll frame that and it'll go on my wall. But I figured to bring it and share. It's one of the coolest looking game covers, and it was a really fun restore job to put back together. If I can find more of them as they come up, I'll do the same thing and try to scan them in. Like I said, I'm building a cover page on my website or a gallery where you can just go pull these as JPEGs. Really cool, fun, make them your background, do whatever you want with them. I've not had any copyright hits on them so far. I think I've covered just about everything. I didn't.
So is there any, what inside the Network 3 box, is it something that the community, the Tandy community is seeing? Is it possible to make it work alike, or is there an interest in?
Oh, I have no doubt that you could probably recreate this really easy. It's just a 555 2. I don't know my chips, so forgive me. I want to say the UARTs.
Yeah.
2 UARTs, 8 per UART, and then other supporting tech in there. But it's really simple. It's just the timer, and then the chips, and then the software probably does more of the complicated switching and doing the handoff than anything. But that's recovered. It's on a GitHub. If anyone wants to download it, play with it. So obviously, there's nothing to emulate it yet. I've even tried it in TRS-80 GP, but the second you start Network Basic, that one's fun. So we have the network 3 prompt, right? You also have a form of BASIC that has special built-in commands for networking. You won't need them yet, but you can start it. And it actually came with a demonstration program for the network 3. But while that's pulling up, I wanted to show the other work that I had to do on this hard drive. So these are not fun. This thing is working itself. Once you get a computer going and it's working and it's passing diagnostics and you have a working RS-232 card and you have the software, then you have to get a hard drive going for these guys.
Yep.
The system doesn't automatically boot from it. It requires a floppy to start it, which is why I had to wait for my beautiful wife to bring me my software. Otherwise it would have been sitting dark. In here, I have installed an emulator for the hard drive. So
Is
it's
it
no longer
the DREM or is it the other one?
Yes, please.
Yeah, MFME. Yeah.
Emulator.
Do you know what hard drive was in there before?
Yep, TM503, Tandy, the tandem.
Yep.
Yep, it does. I've not had any problem with David's card emulating anything for the big Tandys. From the 12 to the 6000 to this thing.
That thing will work in anything.
Oh my God.
He built it. He originally built it to run to do PDP-8. So I mean,
So this is PDP-8 online, right? Okay.
Yep,
yeah.
same guy. But yeah, I got that set up. You can see it's heart beating and clicking away there.
Yeah.
It's just set up in OneDrive. You can emulate too. So this card, I want to take the cover off. This, a lot of you are familiar with the Western Digital 1010.
Yes.
This is before that.
Yeah, this is the one. Yeah.
This is Signetics 8x300.
Yep.
Has the microcontroller. These 3 chips here, I believe, have the microcode that later came on. Like that one's got the later 1010 controller in it. But yeah, that was a fun board. These require alignment most of the time once you get them because they drift component-wise. So you got to use a scope. That was fun. Also, there are technical bulletins that require to be fixed. For instance, the screen print for the board is something they fudged it here. The pull, are they pull up or pull down? The resistor arrays that are here, while they look like they're in the right way, they're in backwards. And so in most cases, anytime you find one of these, you're going to want to take a look at those, and if they look like they're in the right way, they're wrong. Because the print, while it says one is here, one's on the opposite end.
Yeah.
So that was one of the technical bulletins. Also, you get to find, you'll see the modifications that I've done here. Tandy, so going into having multiples of these, right? Say you had 4. This would be your master. And the other ones would not have this board inside. It would just be a drive and a power supply. So what this board does is it sends voltage, 5 volts and 12 volts, out on the data cable for 2 reasons. 5 volts locks this, does this circuit here for write protect.
Yes.
Video Shack wanted you to have a physical write protect so that you could lock the drive reliably. That's what they wanted. So it sends a 5 volt out on the line for the other 3 drives so that they have, I think you have to be pulled up, otherwise the drive, you can't write to it.
Yes.
So if you were to go and get one of these and just try to put a drive into it and just cut these 3 wires off the drive, it wouldn't work. Yeah. You wouldn't get activity and it would be write protected. So basically they're, a guy, I can't remember his name, but he, back in the 80s when they came out with these and people wanted to upgrade the drives, he wrote a walkthrough to basically take those signals from the drive and put them back on the board, write protect, and then you use these two signals here are seek complete and drive ready, and between the seek complete using a 7, call it, I forget the name of it. It's got a little chip up there that does the anding that basically gives you activity when it links the drive. So yeah, fun stuff. Hard drives once you get one of those set up and going. Network basic. So back to the Network 3. Once you're on here, I don't have any other basic programs that run on the Network 3 other than the demonstration that it came with. So you can actually load a program called Mailbox. And it is basically a kind of like a rudimentary chat system. And so
That'd be intriguing.
Oh my gosh, I can't imagine the chaos the teacher probably had to do with it. Everybody turn off messaging, because I'm sure everybody was writing messages to their friends. And so basically, you can send a message, you can check if any messages, and then obviously you can hang up.
Yes.
So like say, I'd like to send a message, and I could say, everyone, and I could say, hello everyone, and it'll save it. You don't have to do this when they were like another one of the events to pick it up on.
So it's not an instant message, it's
Stored in a
saved?
file or something.
Yeah.
It gets queued, yes.
And then so, once we get back on the network, say on another system, fire up network basic, we can pull up the message. You guys are seeing where I'm getting to. I'm sure back in the day, teachers probably had this scripted up with a JCL where you could just say, actually, no, they had another piece of software that I'm actually looking for. It carries this cover, and it's called Pilot. Not Pilot, sorry, Author One. Author One is a software title that goes with the rest of the software titles of this collection, and it basically allows teachers to build a lesson at the screen. And so instead of students having to remember these mnemonic system commands to get things going, you could just basically design an interface like this for your students that says, okay, all right, everybody start up, math lesson 3, and they'll choose it from the screen, and away they go. It's all done in there. Oh, where are you? Talking from the host up there. And then so, are there any messages for me? Students can check. Obviously, students will be saying, Sally, Jim, whatever. I did everyone. And of course, boom. Welcome to the network 3. And so it is a pretty cool way to demonstrate how students can talk to each other. But the network 3 basically relieved the teacher of the madness that was this network 2. Because if Jim or Sally hit reset, you had to stop what you were doing and basically send the program and everything they needed to get them back to where everybody else was waiting.
Yep.
And then with the network 3, if they goofed and hit a button, it was like, all right, yeah, load your program, we'll wait for you. But he or she wouldn't have to come back. This is student, they could just do it on their own as they need. So that's the network 3 images. I brought this one because it was already in the trunk with me from Candy Assembly. This one's also really cool. This was a dead system I pulled off of eBay. It also runs the emulator. I switched its drive out. This one's actually real, but it doesn't have anything important on it. And this system does have some pretty important things on it that I didn't realize until I got into the drive, trying to figure out, just exploring the system. And I was going to record this on whatever. Let's see. Let's close this. This is a before I close it, this is just a kind of like a screensaver fun type thing that was written by Gerald Plank of Microsoft, I believe. Yeah, so Gerald Plank. A lot of these software have their about info filled out, which I'm very grateful for.
And Windows 1.0.
Yes,
Windows 1.0. It is. Actually upgraded all the way to 104. Unbelievably. I don't know what the drivers are. The drivers, I believe, are still just 101. I don't think Candy ever released a disk. But whoever this was ran Windows for a while, ran the whole gamut, at least up to 104.
Sure, there's still a function in there somewhere that's still in use. Windows 11.
So let's see. Let's get out of Windows first because there's still more on here other than Windows 2. So this is what I got when I fired this guy up and got its hard drive working for the first time. And I was blown away because DR Draw is non-existent. I have Graph finally from our, I knew I had something from her on this table. This is also from the lady in Florida. And yeah, she said she had Draw, and I kept asking her for it, and I think, yeah, multi-plane. She sent me multi-plane when I had worked Draw, and I'm like, this is a Draw, it's not whatever. She never got it to me. Luckily, when I got this system, it had it, but it was broken. The DR Draw uses a graphics driver file written that loads on top of GSX.
GSX.
Yep. And it was corrupted. The file was gone. Some of the files were missing from the hard that had eroded. The MFM had just didn't, it was missing spots, had bad sectors. Thankfully, I was able to rescue a majority of it, and the only thing I needed was the graphics driver. Well, then I bought another Tandy 2000 from Eleni in Oklahoma. And in that one, in her pile of discs, I received several demo titles, including a demo for DR Draw and DR Draft. It has the graphics driver, albeit a different name. I renamed it, and it loads. There it is. So right there is where it would drop. It would call for that sys file and be like, end of file encountered, file not completed or something like that.
Yeah, that's actually written code for GSX. So
Nice.
and
Nice.
driver.
So I have the full copy of DR Draw. As I read it, there's a README on these that explain. I was like, well, what's demo about it? It's I can draw and play on it just like the real thing. They stripped it of its ability to output to anything other than the screen.
Yes.
And so now I can actually output to a printer or plotter if I ever had one, which I thought was really cool.
It's very high resolution board stuff.
Yes. So, that's one of the other things let's get to. This was almost VGA, between EGA and VGA. It's 640 by 400, but its horizontal is not 15, it's 24.3.
Yes.
So it's an odd sync frequency. But that's DR Draw. Back to, this is WordPerfect's library, which I'd never heard of before. So it's basically like a menu system where you can launch your programs. So we have DR Draw. Obviously, it says Decimate. I don't think it's actually on there. I've not reinstalled it, so I believe if I call for it, yeah, it's not there anymore. That was another one that was missing and rotted and gone.
What is this?
Designate was it's a little launch pad, it had calendar and word processor. You just load it up as text. I think it was mainly text-based, right?
Yes.
Early
First version were, yeah.
Very,
Yeah.
very gaudy colors.
Yeah.
It's like hot dog stand or something.
Yep. But yeah, you're a calendar, word processor, some basic limited spreadsheets, email, which I've never even seen now, like how that works.
And later ones had a software development that said you could write software for it, which I also have. So.
Okay, cool. From what I understand, Decimate was killed by Microsoft.
Yes.
Tandy was like, Microsoft was like, you can't be developing that. We got Office product coming out.
Yes, pretty much.
So again, that was one of the several ways that Tandy basically bowed to Microsoft along, with making this computer. It's funny if you read the story of how this comes along and how it comes, and I'm sure Paul could probably give us a lot more info on it. But basically, this was how Microsoft really first screwed Tandy. Is they were like, build this, get this with all of this crazy cool new hardware that nobody else is using and that won't be compatible. But no, build it because it'll be advanced and it'll be faster and it'll have more speed and more colors and more space.
Well, this was when Microsoft was still telling all of the hardware vendors, don't worry, we'll all use the BIOS, right to the BIOS, and everybody will be compatible.
The second this came out, Tandy flipped their lid, what do you call it, and angered several of the engineers. So let's see, macros I've not played with. File manager, never played with, obviously since file manager, I'm managing files on my own. It has basic and off. On the first time I brought this to the thing, he has a whole directory on here. I think it's still on this drive, this image. There's like, he sat down the whole visit and wrote like 10 basic programs of colors and games or like stuff on the screen. I'm blown away. So I've got basic and some games or some stuff from Andy on here. Home account, it runs, boring. Microsoft Windows, we'll go into that more. Multiplan 2000, I think it's on here, it runs. I don't need to reinstall it. Norton Advanced. So Norton Advanced has recovery, where you can try to pull files, and I even tried to use Norton Advanced to recover the file for GR Draw, but when I got it, it was empty. It was just a zeroed out file. It tried, but didn't get it. Program editor, not played with that yet. Cornerstone, I can't remember.
I can tell you exactly what that is.
Oh, okay.
That was Infocom's only productivity software product. It was a database written in a virtual machine. Menu-driven database, very much ahead of its time. The downside was because it was done in an expanded form of the Z machine, it was a little on the slow side.
Yeah, drained them of all their proceeds from
Yes.
games were
We're being killed
funneled
because of this
into
product.
paying for Cornerstone. It brought
Yes.
them to their knees.
Yes, pretty much.
Financially.
But they got it out the door, but it almost killed the company for good, and they ultimately had to sell to Activision, so yeah.
Interesting. Maybe I have another one there. Book on titles that come up online. Okay, tax plan, it works. Boring, but perfect, works. Just one processor. And then menu screen. Menu screen is interesting. JB Harold. I do not recognize this name. It's not a name in that notepad that I was showing earlier, which we'll go look at here in a second, from the Microsoft team. So I don't know who this is. I'm assuming this is the person who owned this computer before me. And so he obviously has another whole list of the different programs he was using, which are mostly on that other list. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
One thing I always liked about the Tandy 2000, especially because of the borderline display, the font is absolutely beautiful.
Yes, it is. I love typing on this thing, going into Microsoft Word. It's really fun to just journal if you want.
It was a wonderful machine, but again, it got hamstrung because.
So it says 101. You can't. I tried to alter that. That's basically just a splash screen.
Yeah.
That's all. When I altered it, I successfully did it one time. You alter it before you install it. You alter the screen and then it installs it. I was able to change it to 104, so it said 104. And then I got greedy with it. I was like, oh, I want to make it say some fun stuff like Radio Shack or something. And the second you alter that, I guess it's an array.
Yes.
So it's like you break the math,
Yes.
and it breaks Windows install. So I can't change it to 101, but if you go and look and go to About, it's obviously 104 when it comes out. So they've definitely upgraded it. You'll notice I've got quite a bit of memory here. This actually has a couple of upgrades in it that I didn't realize what it was when I bought it. I got really lucky once I started looking into what it has. This system has both the Envision's memory card upgrade, and so basically, when you get, for those who don't know, when you got this, you only had a 128 or 256K card, and you could only stack 3 of them, maxing you at 700 something. Envision Designs, or Envision, I can't remember the full title of it. You could take your card out of the 2000 when Tandy abandoned it. The Orphans group, I think, coordinated the after stuff. You could send your card to Envision's Designs, and they would change it from 128 to 256 to a 640K card. It's installed 2 ranks of 512 and leave 2 ranks of the 128 and making it 640. And when you put the card in, you add on the Tandy 2000 motherboards, memory is split. You have external cards, additional memory, then you have an internal bank of 256 that sits right up here in the front.
Yep.
You combining those two, it gives it, this one runs as 896. There were other, Envisions actually did an upgrade for the card in here, apparently, I've never seen, but you could actually upgrade this entire front card to 800 or wherever. You could do it all up here, and then you could add even more back here if you wanted.
Yes.
I've not seen that. This is probably the most I've seen. Which also, and then also later I learned, in order for it to display at the beginning the 896K detected, the ROMs had to be updated. So somebody patched these ROMs with updated versions. So I bought a TL866 2 Plus. I hope to read. I think I can read it with those, and I can dump them. And if anybody wants to check them out, I'll put them up online along with this hard drive image. So yeah, the fun stuff in this hard drive image is what confuses me. So we're in just C. If we go into Windows, we start poking around. There were some interesting files on here that didn't come standard with Windows 1. First, this is the first Windows, it's obviously the first Windows, but Windows 1 on the majority of the machines, as I understand it, was black and white. So this was color.
You could do EGA, 16 colors.
Okay.
So 650, yes. Depends on which GDI driver you use.
Okay. And then, as I understand it, this was the only 640 by 400. Everybody else was 640 by 200.
Oh, wait, no, well, here again, no.
AT&T?
No, Mindset.
Mindset? Okay. That's what I was going to say. This probably shares a lot with the Mindset.
Yes.
So if you bought so there's a Windows 1 for say BC Junior. If you bought a Windows 1 application for BC Junior, can it be
Probably.
installed on that?
Yes.
Probably.
Yes.
I believe so.
Yes.
That was what their whole thing Windows was going for. Interesting files, right? Everybody's familiar with Amiga's bounce demonstration.
Mhm.
These guys apparently, it's not anywhere near, obviously it's flashy, but they came up with their own little.
The globe demonstration.
Fun
Yeah,
thing.
That originated on Sun Workstation.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a
I don't know if
Microsoft.
you-
That was a Microsoft demo.
So Bounce by Michael
Yeah.
Chemo, Man, I guess it goes by the name Mans. Bogus Software. So he was part of the group. It's 1988. It's a little after this, of course, came along. This one's like a boring one. Some of the other interesting ones I'm showing earlier. So I guess let's start with the notepad because that's the one that was still. So we have, let's go over what we got. You got the standard stuff that comes with Windows, calendar, calculator, clock, boring stuff. Then you see guts. I'm like, okay, what's guts? IBM GRX. I don't know what that is. I don't know if that came with Windows or not. Then we get to Solitaire, Space, Superfuse, Taurus, TP, which is Taipei, which became the Zhong, Trails, Waiter, and then listed here we have the Windows 2 binary and the OVL file, which I think it's called overlay, but I don't know Windows guts from the early ones. So that was interesting. I've never seen these run. I don't know how to alter it to make it call for those instead of the Windows 1 files. So that'll be an interesting explore. But I thought, so Solitaire, I showed this earlier for some of the folks that are here. Some of you might have not seen it. But it's Solitaire. I'll go to the about first before I let it download these cards. Come on. And it's actually written by Wes. But this is way before
Yes, this is way before you went to Microsoft.
entertainment packs. So I thought that was just unbelievable.
Interesting. And the entertainment pack much later than 95. And entertainment pack much later where they had like,
Yes.
oh, and the same packs.
Yes, it's literally the same thing. They have, when they went to did Windows 3.0, they hired Wes Cherry and he wrote Solitaire and Minesweeper.
I was wondering why, later on it seemed the card back seemed dated to me, but this explains it out. It was dated.
Oh, yeah. Well, so, like, I don't know, do you think he released Solitaire prior to?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Dang.
Yes.
It was really cool to find.
This was his resume piece.
Right? Yeah.
Yes. So yes.
And he never made a penny from it.
Well, it's probably the most played, or most used program.
If you're a time waster. It's true.
Taipei was actually written by David Norris. And he didn't put it in his account. Oh yeah, no, because he puts it right there. And I went and looked up David Norris. David Norris he made it up there pretty far in chain Microsoft wise, from what I understand. But yeah, he invented. If you actually look him up, and you look up David Norris, you find some of his little personal blogs we've had out there for a while. He talks about, he says Windows wouldn't have been crap without games. If you put games in it, nobody would care. They wasted their time with it. It's kind of Windows kind of carried, or games kind of carried Windows. So yeah,
Really, yeah.
interesting.
When Windows 1.0 shipped, the only game that they shipped to was Reversing.
Okay. And I saw somebody playing that earlier because that is on here. Yeah, Reversing.
I remember buying Windows 3.1, not just thinking it was something I needed to buy. I got home installed and like, now what? I mean, I still don't know what.
No, Windows 1.0 was a colossal disappointment coming from the fact that I grew up in a household that had Sun 2 machines in the house with actual Windows systems, and looking and going, yeah, okay. We were much more impressed when the Amiga was
Oh, okay.
it was like, holy crap! It's a full-blown color workstation for $150 price.
Now, are you able to influence the output with the mouse that
Yep.
you're doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you get this one with Hans Spiller. another Microsoft thing. So yeah, you hold the button, and then you can.
Yes.
It's not doing it now because I changed it to color, which is more sparse.
Yes.
But like basically, you hold the button for a little bit, and it'll actually run out of memory or like what you're doing, and then when you let go, it tries to loop what you were doing with the mouse button and just kind of make a kaleidoscope. I've never really gotten a lot out of this one, but it's still interesting to pull up. Kind of fun. What else on here? So that was the mouse kaleidoscope. Waytor.
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah. Anybody ever play the game of Life? And not
Yep.
like Life.
John Conway, this is John Conway's game of life.
I'm guessing that that's what this is.
Yes.
Yep, it is.
Yep.
So I thought that was really cool because that definitely didn't ship with Windows.
One of the funniest aspects of Windows, and they went through version 1 and version 2 before anybody realized, hey, maybe we should put a close button on the window.
I will say the one I had running, the screensaver one. If you flick that into, oh yeah, look at me, I'm stuck. If you
Gentlemen,
if you flick it into full screen.
I'm not going to interrupt. There's no reason not to continue exactly what's going on here. That's why we're all here. But I'm going to open up the door. I'm going to, let's say that the top portion is officially concluded, but nothing has to change. This whole little conversation can continue.
Okay.
But I'm going to turn off the camera here. And thank you very much for that for the presentation. I think the actual presentation concluded a little while ago, but thank you very much for that. And I'm just going to open up the door so people can come on in and hear what's going on and participate. But thank you very much. No reason to stop. I'm sorry.
And the effort it took.
And let me.
Oh my gosh.
You may want to. I'm not sure.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, once you get it,
Then just hit the old stop button on here, and then it's good.